Hello peeps, welcome back to Big Deck Player with me, Matt Sparks. This week we will be taking a look at a rogue deck. We don't feature rogue decks on this series very often. You don't see very many rogue decks on ladder very often either. You occasionally see the sharp soiled oil deck that gets sort of played around occasionally. This one does have the sharp soiled oil in it, but it's a slightly different way of playing it, and it's done on a budget. You can craft this deck for 1400 dust. It's called the Flurry Face Rogue Budget. And here is the deck. Just going to refer to it as Flurry Face because that's a lot easier to say. And as you can see, there's not a huge amount of variation in the cards. There's lots of doubles, and it's quite low cost stuff. Now the idea of this deck is to rush your opponent. You go face, and it's kind of like the face rogues that we used to see before some of the other cards got introduced. You won't see many mechs in this deck, but it seems to work pretty well anyway. Alright, so let's start at the top. We have one Shadow Step. This is a great combo card. Because of its zero cost, it means you can get your combos off a lot easier. And there aren't a huge amount of combos in this deck, but they are very necessary for you to be able to win. You won't be doing much trading if you do any trading at all. You certainly don't want to be doing any trading with your minions. If you're going to do any trading at all, it should be with your weapons. And you want to try and keep your minions alive for as long as possible, so they can do as much damage as possible. So yes, we've got a Shadow Step. As I mentioned, we've got some stuff that combos, but this is also particularly useful with some of the charge minions that we've got in this deck. And there's some other cards that have special effects that you might want to make use of as well. 1 mana, Cold Blood. We have 2 of these to give your minions, preferably with the combo, a +4 attack. If you can't combo it, it's probably not worth playing, because you want to try and get as much damage out and to the face as possible. Also, 1 mana, we have 2 Deadly Poison. Using these for the start of combos is pretty nice, and obviously means your normal 1 attack dagger then does 3 damage, which means you can trade it quite effectively at the beginning of the game. We have 2 Argent Squires because they're a little bit difficult to get hold of, and you can combo the Cold Blood onto Argent Squire, giving it +4 attack, making it a 5/1 with Divine Shield, which to begin with can be quite tricky to get rid of unless you're against a mage, in which case you might find you struggle a bit with this deck, because there's quite a few minions that only have 1 health, so it might be a bit tricky against mages. We have 2 Leper Gnomes, a great 1-drop, guaranteed 2 damage unless it gets silenced, but who's going to silence a Leper Gnome really? I mean, not many people. When you're preparing your cards for your mulligan, you kind of want to get your Argent Squires and your Leper Gnomes as early as possible. Probably a Deadly Poison as well. If not, then the other 1 cost, a Southsea Deckhand, has charge while you have your weapon equipped, which is pretty cool. We have 2 Blade Flurries, which is cool because not only does it deal damage to minions, but it also deals damage to the face as well. So using Blade Flurry on the last hit of your deadly poisoned daggers is pretty cool because it'll do 3 damage to everything on the board plus 3 damage to your opponent's face. 2 Eviscerates. Again, you want to combo this as much as possible, getting that 4 damage out. Try, if you can, to use this to go for face, because that extra 4 damage is pretty nice. But I've seen quite a few people using stuff like Azure Drakes recently, and this is quite a nice way to be able to just get rid of them. There's 2 Saps. Now, you have to be a bit careful when you're using Sap. Ideally, you just want to use them for any taunts that come up. What I'd like to use them for is stuff that's been buffed. If you sap something, then that buff is going to go away. So anything that gets like a Blessing of Kings, you know, that kind of stuff. If you sap it, that buff goes away. That blessing, that card that they used to buff it, has just been worthless. So that's pretty cool. Or anything that has like a special effect on it. Maybe Knife Jugglers, but that kind of special effect, again, that might be something you wanna get rid of. Anything that's going to cause you a problem, basically, is worth sapping. Also, at 2 mana, we have 2 Annoyatrons. we only have a couple of mechs in this deck, and this is one of them. Just because it is annoying to get rid of. They don't do too much damage, but if you combo them with the Cold Blood, then you've got a 5/2 taunt with the Divine Shield, which is pretty nice, and it's a little bit more, has a little bit more survival than the Argent Squire. And if you find that you know, it gets the Divine Shield knocked off, or maybe it gets down to 1 health, you could always Shadow Step it back into your hand and play it straight again for free, and then they have to get through the Divine Shield all over again, which is pretty nice. Also at 2 mana we have an Ironbeak Owl. It's the only silence in the deck, so make sure you use it wisely. If you do have the Shadow Step, you can always bring it back into your hand to play it for free later on, which is pretty cool. I quite like that idea. Perdition's Blade, one of these at 3 mana. Try and get the combo off on this. I usually try and keep the combo for taking out an enemy minion, or helping to take out an enemy minion at least. Also at 3 mana we have 1 Arcane Golem. Now this is another charged creature that we can use the Shadow Step on. So you can play it, do 4 damage to their face, Shadow Step it back into your hand, then play it again. Hopefully that will be more or less a bit of a finisher, that kind of play. You don't really want to be playing the Arcane Golem too early in the game if you can avoid it, because obviously you don't want to give your opponent a mana advantage, because you won't win. We have 2 Cold Light Oracles. You've got so many low cost cards in your deck that you will need card draw. You will need it. It's just not possible to play this deck without getting some kind of card draw. This is another one that you might want to Shadow Step, because you might want that extra cards, and it might help you burn some cards on your opponent's side as well, which would be an added bonus, but primarily you want to use this to generate cards for yourself. 2 Wolf Riders for that charge damage. Again, you can Shadow Step one of these for the extra damage, combo it with Cold Blood. Lots of damage straight to the face. Tinker's Sharp Sword Oil. As I mentioned before, we do have one of these in the deck. So this will give your weapon +3 attack and give a random friendly minion +3 attack. You've got to get the combo on this, because it's too good to not get the combo on this. We have 2 Jeeves. As I mentioned earlier, you're going to need that card draw, so if you can get a Jeeves out, then that's great. Preferably get him to draw 3 cards as well, if you can, because Jeeves will probably die the next turn. So yeah, try and make the most of putting a Jeeves out if you can. He kind of acts as a soft taunt, which is pretty nice, and if he doesn't, then your opponent's probably going to regret it. And then last but not least, at 5 mana we have an Assassin's Blade. 3 damage, 4 durability, combos very nicely with Deadly Poison and the Sharp Sword Oil. And because you've got 4 durability on it, it means you can possibly do a little bit of trading with it, taking out some of your opponent's minions so that your minions get to stay alive that little bit longer. I've had mixed results with this deck. Again, as I mentioned before, if you come up against the mage, you're probably going to struggle unless you get the perfect draw, and they don't. But with the amount of mech mages, you probably will find it quite difficult, just for the simple fact that a lot of the creatures have very low health, and they can just pick them off. If you can manage to get enough creatures on the board, you might be okay. If you get to make pretty good trades, if you get your Deadly Poisons and stuff out, you might be okay. But in my experience, I've struggled against the mage class with this deck, but most other ones I've done okay. I've done alright with. It's a bit of fun. It's probably not the most reliable deck in the world, because it does rely on getting the right cards. I mean, if you don't get your Argent Squires, Leper Gnomes, South Sea Deckhands in your kind of opening hand, or very soon after, then you're probably not going to get enough momentum to finish them off. And the longer the game goes, the more it's likely to go into your opponent's favour, because once you get to sort of turn 6, turn 7, turn 8, you're going to start seeing stuff like Dr. Boom, Ragnaros, and you don't really have much of a way of dealing with that stuff unless you've got saps in your hand. But that's only going to buy you a small amount of time, so you still need to be pretty fast with this deck. So it will take a bit of practice to get used to, if you're not used to playing a rogue deck, just to get the combos and stuff like that. But I found that when it works really, really well. But sometimes it doesn't work. But then that's the case with most Hearthstone decks. When they work really, really well, but they don't always work because that's the nature of Hearthstone, and sometimes the game hates you, as it does with me. So that's the deck. That is the Flurry Face deck. If you like this deck, head on over to halfpone.com. I'll put a link in the description so you can go check it out for yourself. He's done a really good write-up, so you probably should go and give it a little bit of time just to see all his write-up. And give it a thumbs up, because I think it's a pretty cool and pretty interesting deck, and it's not one that you see very often, so that's always good, and I like that kind of stuff. If you do use this deck, let me know how you get on. If you make any videos using this deck, feel free to link them to me on my Twitter, and I will be sure to check them out. If you have any recommendations for any future decks you'd like to see featured on Big Deck Player, then again, either leave a comment in below, not in the description. I write in the description. You can put stuff in the comments. Or you can message me on Twitter, and that's this deck for this week. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next week for some more Big Deck Player. Thanks again. Bye bye.